Imagine this: you're quietly enjoying your morning coffee on the land you've called home for 12 years when a woman in designer yoga pants struts up your driveway, flanked by two assistants, and hands you an invoice for nearly $4,000. That's exactly the scene when Karen Whitmore, yes, that's her real name, decided my off-grid cabin was dragging down the property values in her precious HOA. The absurd part? My land has been here since 1987. Her HOA didn't even exist until 2019. I was standing in my gravel driveway, her sharp voice bouncing off my metal garage door while the pungent smell of fresh asphalt from their latest road project lingered in the air. In one hand, I gripped my original deed. In the other, her bogus official paperwork. The autumn wind rattled those pages like it was laughing at the absurdity. If someone tried to take your land with forged documents, what would you do? Drop your most outrageous HOA nightmare in the comments and let me know where you're tuning in from. I'm willing to bet half of you have dealt with these power-drunk neighborhood rulers. My name's Jake Riverside, and this is the story of how the worst 2 years of my life turned into the most unexpected ammunition I never knew I'd need. Back in 1987, I was a 25-year-old electrician who scraped together every cent 47,000 to buy 2.3 acres of untouched Colorado land. Over the next 15 years, I built my dream from the ground up: a modest off-grid cabin, solar panels, a workshop packed with renewable energy projects, and gardens that could feed half the county. My wife, Sarah, adored it. Every evening, we'd sit on the porch, listening to the prairie wind and daydreaming about future additions we'd never get to build. Cancer took her 2 years ago. Now it's just me and Voltage, my rescue dog named after my trade, keeping her spirit alive on the land she helped shape. My place sits along the original county road, surrounded by what was once nothing but wide-open prairie. That changed about 5 years back when a California developer decided our valley was perfect for luxury mountain living. Enter Meadowbrook Estates 400 polished homes, manicured lawns, artificial ponds, and price tags hitting $800,000. All blessed with the HOA lifestyle. Here's the punchline: county records explicitly excluded my land from their development plans. The original surveyor even planted flagged stakes marked exempt around my boundaries. I've got the photos, permits, and a 35-year paper trail. But somehow, nobody clued in Karen Whitmore. She rolled in from Orange County just as I was burying Sarah, 47 years old, ex-real estate agent turned HOA president, cruising around in a spotless white BMW that avoids dirt roads like they're toxic. 3 private school kids, a dentist's husband, and the kind of entitlement you only get when nobody's ever told you no. She's the type who measures neighbors' lawns with a ruler and files complaints because someone's garbage can set out 47 minutes too long. Her overpowering floral perfume could probably knock a buzzard clean off a garbage truck. When we first met, she seemed harmless enough: sweet smile, friendly wave. Hi, I'm Karen from the Homeowners Association, just doing a neighborhood survey on property upgrades. 3 days later, she came back with the Covenant Compliance Committee, 2 nervous guys in polos who looked like they'd been drafted against their will. Her heels clicked across my gravel like warning shots. These solar panels are dropping nearby property values by $50,000 per unit, she declared, waving a fat binder of rules. You've got 30 days to meet architectural standards or you'll face daily fines of $100. I calmly pulled out my 1987 deed, clear proof I was exempt from any future HOA. She glanced at it through oversized sunglasses and said, "Legal loopholes won't save you forever. This is about community standards and property values." I reminded her politely that my land predates her HOA by 32 years. Her smile iced over. "We'll see about that." When she marched back to her BMW, the crunch of gravel under her designer heels sounded like a clock starting to tick. The very next morning, I woke to the sound of voices and the snap of measuring tapes. 3 HOA contractors were photographing my fence line, documenting boundary discrepancies, as Karen later called them, on land that's existed long before her neighborhood. That's when I knew this wasn't about grass height or trash cans. It was about control, and she'd picked the wrong widower to mess with. Sarah always said I was too stubborn for my own good. Time to prove her right. 2 weeks later, my mailbox turned into her personal war front. First came a county complaint, claiming I violated new residential zoning, never mind my agricultural zoning is permanent. Then came an HOA letter on fancy letterhead demanding $500 a month in dues, backdated to 2019. That's $2,000 for an HOA I never joined. She wasn't finished. She rallied a petition calling my workshop a safety hazard, claiming my solar batteries might explode and my tools were excessively noisy. Clearly, she'd never been near an actual job site at a M. The final insult was on Facebook. A post to the Meadowbrook Estates group labeling me non-compliant and a danger to property values. She snapped photos from her BMW that somehow made my neatly organized workshop look like a storm had ripped through it. 63 strangers I'd never met chimed in, demanding something be done about the eyesore. I sipped my coffee, scrolled, and decided it was time for some old-school electrical troubleshooting. Traced the problem to the source. I dove into county records, learning more about property law than any retired electrician should. That's when I uncovered her little secret. Her real estate license had 2 prior violations for misrepresenting property boundaries. Sarah always said patterns reveal character, and Karen's was crystal clear. Then I remembered something from my union days: liability insurance. A quick records check showed the HOA's policy excluded disputes with pre-existing non-members. Even better, a Freedom of Information Act request revealed her husband's dental practice owed $127,000 in back taxes. No wonder she was itching to squeeze money from others. Karen's first big mistake? Picking a fight with someone who solves problems for a living. I installed pro-grade security cameras, night vision, motion alerts, cloud backup after spotting fresh footprints near my fence. Within 3 days, her so-called safety patrol was trespassing, photographing my workshop windows, and testing my gates. The irony? The woman calling me dangerous was committing actual crimes. But that footage led to my favorite find yet. Her HOA's incorporation documents never properly listed my parcel in their legal boundaries. Some lazy lawyer had used boilerplate text without checking the maps. Legally, Karen had zero authority over me, less than voltage. Honestly, I sent her Facebook posts and my 1987 deed to the local paper. The Mountain Valley Tribune ran "Rural Resident Fights HOA Overreach" on the front page. My quiet dispute suddenly became public entertainment. Karen demanded the editor retract the story, threatening to pull her ad money. The editor printed her letter right beside 3 others from residents sick of HOA nonsense. That's when the tide turned. Mrs. Henderson from 3 streets over showed up with chocolate chip cookies and questions about solar power. She told me Karen had harassed her over a vegetable garden. "We're all tired of being pushed around," she said. That week, 3 more neighbors shared similar stories. Karen had targeted the veteran with the pickup truck, the teacher with the wildflowers, the retiree with the brown fence. The sound of friendly footsteps on my driveway replaced the hostile crunch of her heels. For the first time since Sarah passed, my land felt like a community gathering spot, not a fortress. Karen wanted me isolated. Instead, she created a rally point. Standing on my porch that evening, watching voltage chase fireflies while neighbors chatted about gardens and solar panels, I realized Sarah had been right. Good people find each other when things get hard. Karen assumed I'd fight alone. She was about to see how wrong she was. Her counterattack was quick and nasty. 3 days after my newspaper win, a process server handed me a civil lawsuit. She'd hired Peden and Associates, a firm that makes property compliance enforcement sound as warm as it is. The suit accused me of being a nuisance and a health hazard, claiming I'd wrecked neighboring property values. 27 pages demanded I remove my solar panels, tear down my workshop, and pay $35,000 to my neighbors. And she kept escalating. Her safety patrol now drove by twice daily, snapping photos of everything from my mailbox to my solar array for her evidence file. Then she tried to weaponize the county building department, claiming my workshop was unpermitted and unsafe. Never mind that I'd built it legally in 1992 with full permits. She figured bureaucracy could destroy what harassment couldn't. That's when I called my union buddy Mike, who connected me to Frank Lucas, a retired municipal lawyer who'd fought these exact battles for 30 years. Frank flipped through my case file, leaned back in his creaky chair, and grinned. "Jake," he said, "this is the sloppiest legal work I've seen in decades. They're making claims they couldn't prove in a million years." Frank's first breakthrough completely turned my day around. Every single building permit I'd ever obtained wasn't just valid, it was protected under state grandfather laws. Modern HOAs can't suddenly enforce new rules on structures that already existed. Apparently, Karen's pricey legal team forgot to share that little detail, but Frank's true genius wasn't in defense, it was in going on the attack. Rather than simply countering her claims, we hit back with a lawsuit of our own: harassment, defamation, and intentional infliction of emotional distress. Karen had been itching for a legal brawl, and she was about to get one. Things began to shift in our favor when Frank uncovered Karen's fatal misstep. While combing through the HOA's incorporation papers, he stumbled on something that made both of us burst out laughing. The original developer had never officially transferred ownership of the community's common areas to the HOA. In legal terms, Karen's empire owned nothing except debt and letterhead. My security cameras supplied the knockout blow. Frank subpoenaed footage of Karen's so-called safety patrol repeatedly trespassing on my property. Turns out peeking into someone's private workshop through the windows without permission isn't just creepy, it's both criminal trespassing and invasion of privacy. The local newspaper pounced on the story. HOA president caught trespassing in property dispute made the front page again, this time complete with screenshots of Karen lurking outside my windows like some nosy suburban spy. The neighborhood's reaction split almost evenly but tipped toward me. The community forum exploded with arguments. Team Jake was made up of everyone fed up with Karen's tape measure tyranny, while Team Karen was mostly recent California arrivals who never met a regulation they didn't adore. Soon, County Supervisor Williams was getting a flood of calls about HOA overreach. Williams, a fourth-generation Coloradan who remembered when our valley was nothing but cattle land, had zero tolerance for imported drama. "I've known Jake Riverside for 20 years, he told the paper. "If Karen Whitmore thinks she can California fire our county with frivolous lawsuits, she's got another thing coming." The cracks were showing. Karen's real estate clients began asking awkward questions about her legal troubles, and nothing kills sales faster than finding out the HOA president is tangled in federal court battles with neighbors. 3 other residents came forward to Frank, sharing their own stories of Karen's harassment. I wasn't her only target, just the most visible one. She'd been systematically bullying anyone who didn't fit her picture of suburban perfection. Then came the sweetest win completely out of left field. Tom Morrison, the original developer of Meadowbrook Estates, called me personally after seeing the paper. "Jake, your property was never included in any HOA agreements," he said, sounding professionally embarrassed. "I've got the original survey maps to prove it. Karen either never read the plans or chose to ignore them." Morrison faxed over documents that dismantled her legal charade entirely. Survey maps, exclusion agreements, and correspondence, with county planners all proving what I'd said from the start. My land was never under HOA control. Hearing my fax machine spit out 40 pages of bulletproof proof felt like Christmas morning. Karen had been bluffing from day one, holding nothing but a busted hand. Frank wasted no time filing the new evidence with the court, alongside a motion to dismiss her claims entirely and demand attorneys' fees for frivolous litigation. Suddenly, Karen's pricey lawyers went silent. Round 2 went to the stubborn electrician with grandfathered property rights. Karen's desperation hit new highs when her legal team began bailing. Peden and associates quietly withdrew, citing irreconcilable differences with client expectations. Lawyers speak. For our clients lost it, but losing her lawyers only made Karen more dangerous. Like a cornered animal, she lashed out. Her next stunt was as bold as it was illegal, convincing the HOA board to slap an emergency assessment of $15,000 on my property for imaginary environmental hazards. The notice, printed on official letterhead, came with threats of liens and foreclosure. I was still laughing at her nerve when the phone rang. Detective Martinez from the sheriff's office wanted to discuss a complaint filed against me. Karen claimed I'd cornered her in a grocery store parking lot, making menacing statements about property rights while using aggressive body language. Every word was fiction. I hadn't seen her anywhere except driving past my place in her BMW. Martinez reviewed my security footage and cleared me instantly. Better yet, he warned her that filing false police reports is a felony. That little taste of vindication was better than Sarah's homemade apple pie, but Karen wasn't done torching the earth. She organized a boycott of any business that supported me, claiming advertisers in the Mountain Valley Tribune were destroying property values. Bob Fletcher, who runs the hardware store, called to warn me she told him to stop selling me supplies or lose all HOA member business. Bob's answer was perfect. Lady, Jake's been my customer 30 years. You've been here 2 minutes. Guess who I'm keeping? Her next desperate move? My utilities. She filed complaints with the electric company and water authority, claiming, my off-grid setup broke safety codes and should be disconnected for public safety. The irony? I don't even use them. My solar panels and well water made her threats as empty as her legal standing. Meanwhile, my support grew. 3 more neighbors came to Frank with their own harassment stories. A retired judge from neighboring Elkhorn County offered free legal advice. Even the county assessor publicly stated HOAs can't tax non-members. Things really took off when someone posted my case on Reddit. It went viral overnight. HOA overreach trended locally, and property rights activists from across Colorado reached out. Karen's reputation was imploding. The State Real Estate Commission opened an investigation after 3 clients accused her of lying about HOA authority during sales. Her husband's tax liens made the paper. Nothing says responsible leader like owing 6 figures while extorting neighbors for fake fees. Even her own board started turning on her. Patricia Hendricks resigned publicly over aggressive tactics and questionable expenses. 2 more followed within a week. Karen's counterattack? She called an emergency HOA meeting to address the ongoing threat I posed to safety and property values. Proposals included hiring private security and installing cameras to monitor me. 47 residents showed up, largest turnout in HOA history. I watched from my porch as cars filled the lot. Mrs. Henderson stopped by afterward, cookies in hand, to report the disaster. Jake, it was a train wreck, she said. Karen ranted about property rights terrorists until half the room walked out. The neighborhood Facebook admin finally booted her for inflammatory posts. Her farewell message was a masterpiece of entitled rage. Then came another twist, a call from a Denver Channel 7 journalist looking into HOA abuse in rural Colorado. Turns out my case was part of a bigger trend they'd been tracking. Standing on my porch that night, watching the voltage flicker in the distance as fireflies danced and the sun sank behind the mountains, I thought about how far things had shifted. 6 months earlier, Karen seemed untouchable. HOA president, real estate agent, suburban queen bee. Now, she was isolated, under investigation, and running out of friends and options. Sarah always said bullies hang themselves if you give them enough rope. Karen was proving her right spectacularly. The call that changed everything came at 6:30 a.m. on a Tuesday. Judge Hamilton Crenshaw, the retired jurist from Elkhorn County, had news that made Karen's crusade not just wrong, but possibly criminal. I've been digging through federal land records, Jake, he said, and your HOA problem just got a lot bigger. Turns out Meadowbrook Estates sits on land with unresolved Native American treaty claims from 1878. The Arapaho Nation had never formally ceded mineral and water rights, creating a legal shadow over the whole development. My property was excluded from the original plat specifically because the surveyor knew about the treaty issues. Some long-gone lawyer had been smart enough to keep my parcel clear of the mess. Karen's law firm had been charging the HOA $45,000. For legal research they knew was useless. You can't enforce HOA rules on land that might not even legally belong to the HOA. Then Crenshaw dropped another bomb. The HOA's financial records subpoenaed by Frank showed staggering fraud, $230,000 in legal and consulting fees over 3 years, money meant for community upkeep. Karen's real estate company pocketed $85,000 in management commissions despite managing 0 properties. The kicker? Those mandatory assessments weren't funding the neighborhood, they were paying her personal legal bills and her husband's dental practice expansion. Several board members had conveniently invested in his practice right before approving those shady contracts. Federal law requires HOAs to disclose all conflicts of interest. Karen didn't, and buried in the original incorporation documents were 3 forged signatures, people who'd moved away before the HOA even existed. The state attorney general had already been investigating similar HOA fraud across Colorado. My case wasn't unique, it was part of a coast-to-coast pattern of corruption. Crenshaw's digging revealed Karen's real motive. Her real estate business was bleeding money from lawsuits filed by clients who'd caught her lying about property boundaries. The HOA presidency wasn't about community service, it was a cash machine to cover her debts. Her lawyers bailed the next day, citing ethical conflicts. Translation: they'd realized they were complicit in fraud and didn't want to face charges. The HOA board called an emergency meeting to discuss her removal after Frank handed over proof of forged documents and financial misconduct. Suddenly, board members who'd supported her had memory lapses about their involvement. The media shifted focus. This wasn't a neighbor spat anymore. It was a corruption expose. The Denver Channel 7 investigation now included possible treaty violations and civil rights abuses, carrying real prison time. Ironically, my property value rose. Buyers were looking for HOA-free living. 3 agents even called to ask if I'd sell. Karen's war to devalue my land had made me the most desirable neighbor in the valley. Standing in my workshop that night, breathing in sawdust and mountain air, I realized this wasn't about property anymore, it was about justice. The morning after Crenshaw's revelation, my quiet workshop turned into mission control for the most satisfying legal campaign of my life. My dream team assembled like something out of a heist movie, except instead of stealing jewels, we were reclaiming justice from a suburban dictator. And with Crenshaw's 3 decades of constitutional law experience and a Rolodex that could topple governments, we were just getting started. Rebecca Torres, Channel 7's hard-hitting investigative journalist, arrived carrying stacks of public records and a nose for corruption that could sniff out fraud from miles away. The surprise guest was Marcus Littlefeather, a tribal legal advocate who had driven from the Arapaho Nation offices after learning of possible treaty violations. These land claims have been dormant for generations, he said, spreading century-old maps across my kitchen table. Your HOA just woke up a legal nightmare with a hefty price tag. My friend Mike, an electrician with a knack for high-end gear, volunteered to revamp my security system with military-grade surveillance equipment borrowed from his nephew's private security company. If Karen wants to play spy, we'll give her a taste of her own game, he grinned, installing concealed cameras equipped with facial recognition software. Our legal strategy had 3 main thrusts, each aimed at dismantling a different leg of Karen's operation. Frank would move to have every HOA claim dismissed for lack of jurisdiction, then hit back with countersuits for malicious prosecution, defamation, and criminal harassment. Judge Crenshaw would pursue federal civil rights charges over Karen's long-standing discrimination against residents who didn't fit her mold. Marcus would file tribal sovereignty claims that could unravel the development's legal standing entirely. If we could prove treaty violations during the original land transfer, Marcus explained, every property deed in Meadowbrook would be on shaky ground. Rebecca's financial digging uncovered schemes that would make Bernie Madoff envious. Karen had siphoned $127,000 from HOA reserves through shell companies, bogus vendor invoices, and unauthorized loans to her failing real estate business. The money residents believed was funding neighborhood improvements had actually paid for a Hawaiian vacation, her daughter's private school tuition, and legal fees for her husband's tax issues. Federal embezzlement charges alone carried 20-year prison terms. My favorite find was her consulting deals with companies that existed only on paper. Meadowbrook Landscaping Services, which had billed $43,000 for work never done, conveniently shared the same address as Karen's real estate office. Coincidence? The FBI doesn't think so. We organized our evidence with military precision timelines showing 3 years of escalating harassment, forensic accounting proving systematic theft, and video footage of criminal trespass and attempted property damage. I set up encrypted communication channels on Mike's nephew's recommendation. Judge Crenshaw insisted on operational security after learning Karen had hired private investigators to dig into my personal life. She's desperate enough to try anything, he warned. The community effort was poetry in motion. Rebecca helped me launch a property rights defense fund online, which raised $75,000 in its first week. Donations poured in from across the nation to fight HOA abuse and suburban corruption. Weekly coffee meetups at Murphy's Diner turned into strategy meetings for neighbors. The smell of bacon and coffee mixed with the sound of people reclaiming their rights. Mrs. Henderson organized carpools to county supervisor meetings where residents demanded HOA oversight. My HOA accountability toolkit became an overnight hit after Rebecca showcased it on the news. 3 simple steps: demand detailed audits, request proof of legal authority, and document harassment for law enforcement. Websites I'd found for checking HOA complaint histories crashed from the flood of visitors. State Attorney General databases reported record searches for HOA fraud cases. Meanwhile, Mike transformed my property into a fortress: solar panels, professional-grade cameras with cloud backups, motion sensors detecting vehicles half a mile away, and an encrypted recording system that sent evidence straight to Frank's office. Every HOA violation was logged with timestamps and GPS data, every financial irregularity packaged for prosecution, every treaty violation compiled into airtight legal briefs. We prepared polished presentation materials for the attorney general, flowcharts tracing HOA funds to Karen's personal expenses, photos of forged signatures, falsified incorporation papers. Judge Crenshaw's favorite moment was discovering Karen had targeted veterans, elderly residents, and anyone outside her ideal image. That's not just fraud, he said grimly. That's a civil rights violation under federal hate crime laws. On the night before our counteroffensive, I stood in my workshop surrounded by evidence and tools for my vindication. I could almost feel Sarah beside me. She'd always fought for what was right. No matter how powerful the enemy, tomorrow Karen would learn that stealing from neighbors and faking legal documents comes with consequences. The hunter was about to become the hunted. Karen's collapse began with desperation. Right after the HOA board meeting, she hired a private investigator to dig into my past as if being a quiet, grieving widower was some sort of scandal. Her PI was as sloppy as her legal strategy. My new cameras caught him trespassing 3 times in today's, peeking through my workshop windows and rifling through my mailbox. Mike's high-end gear captured crystal-clear license plates, faces, and incriminating behavior. That's federal mail theft, Detective Martinez told Karen when she tried to spin it as legitimate investigation. Now her PI faced felony charges and Karen faced accessory charges, Her desperation deepened when she tried to bribe County Inspector Rodriguez to condemn my solar setup. Rebecca's hidden camera recorded every word, Karen offering $5,000 in cash for trumped-up safety violations. Rodriguez reported her to the district attorney within an hour. Now she could add corruption of a public official to her growing list of federal charges. Her next move was pure theater, a so-called concerned citizens protest outside my property, complete with professionally printed signs declaring "Protect our property values" and "Safe neighborhoods matter." The turnout was pitiful. 7 people, mostly her own family. My cameras documented every face for future harassment cases. Neighbors drove by laughing. That afternoon, Mrs. Henderson organized a counter-protest, 43 people holding property rights matter and "Stop HOA tyranny" signs, turning Karen's stunt into a public humiliation. Local news covered both, portraying her as a fringe extremist leading a tiny cult of compliance. Karen's final play in this round was an ethics complaint against Frank with the state bar, accusing him of filing frivolous lawsuits for personal gain and conspiring with criminals. The bar dismissed it within 48 hours as baseless retaliation and opened an investigation into her for abusing the court system. I stayed patient and above reproach, just like Sarah had taught me. No public blow-ups, no online rants, just careful documentation and professional legal responses. Media coverage exploded after Rebecca's story went viral, and national property rights groups rallied behind me. Cable news called it a textbook case of HOA overreach. Karen's ill-fated TV interview became an internet sensation. When asked about the forged signatures, she called them administrative corrections. Asked about the missing money, she blamed accounting errors. When confronted with the bribery tape, she claimed it was a misunderstood donation to county safety programs while holding the exact cash she'd offered. Social media dubbed it "Karen Lies," trending for 3 days. My crowdfunding doubled to $150,000. The financial strain crushed her remaining allies. Her real estate license was permanently revoked. 3 HOA board members resigned. Insurers canceled coverage for Meadowbrook Estates. Even her husband filed for divorce after learning she'd forged his signature on HOA contracts. Moving trucks became a daily sight as residents fled the sinking ship. That evening, I stood on my porch watching lightning bugs flicker while police cruised by for the 3rd time that week. Karen had turned me from an isolated widower into the center of a national property rights movement. Tomorrow would bring the last chapter of her undoing, but Karen still had one reckless card to play. With bribery and fraud charges mounting, she turned to attacking my mental health. She filed a petition to have me committed for psychiatric evaluation, claiming I'd been acting erratically, making paranoid statements, and stockpiling weapons. She produced sworn statements from neighbors I'd never met, describing confrontations that never happened. A judge demanded evidence before approving the 72-hour hold. Court-appointed psychologist Dr. Patricia Kim spent 3 hours evaluating me and reviewing the claims. "You're not only mentally stable," she told me, "you're incredibly resilient given what you've endured." This petition is clearly an abuse of mental health services for personal revenge. Karen's next angle was environmental sabotage. She filed a false EPA complaint accusing me of improper solar battery storage and contaminating groundwater. The inspector arrived expecting disaster, but found the county's most eco-friendly property. My solar system exceeded all safety standards, my septic system was newer than most, and my water was cleaner than the city's. "I wish every property owner was this responsible," he said. Her third and boldest scheme was to take my land entirely. She convinced the 3 remaining HOA board members to label my property blighted and petition the county for emergency eminent domain to protect community health and safety. The petition survived only for hours before county attorney Sarah Martinez dismissed it with a laugh. Martinez made it clear, both privately and publicly, that homeowners associations have no power of eminent domain. and that Mr. Riverside's land was the opposite of neglected. It stood as an example of careful, responsible land use. Karen's last desperate move was to persuade Deputy Collins that I was some kind of armed radical with stockpiles of weapons, a danger to public safety. She presented evidence tying me to anti-government rhetoric and militia activity claims drawn from my outspoken defense of property rights. Sheriff Thompson personally reviewed her accusations and didn't hesitate to reach the only logical conclusion. "Ma'am," he told her, "Mr. Riverside is a respected member of this community, engaged in lawful disputes. Filing false reports about terrorism is a federal felony." That's when the bottom truly fell out from under Karen. A psychologist's assessment concluded she was showing paranoid tendencies and possible delusional thinking about property lines and legal authority. An EPA inspector filed a complaint over her bogus environmental reports. The county attorney called for an inquiry into her misuse of the legal system. Frank assembled our final evidence packet like a seasoned prosecutor prepping for a capital case. 8 for 7 pages covering 3 years of violations, crimes, and fraud. It included surveillance footage revealing an undeniable pattern of harassment and trespassing, plus forensic accounting that exposed $312,000 siphoned from HOA funds. Marcus Littlefeather's research on tribal sovereignty delivered the ultimate blow. Proof of federal treaty violations that could render every property deed in Meadowbrook Estates invalid if the original land transfer breached treaty rights. Marcus explained, the entire development's legal standing would crumble. By then, the community was fully behind me. Local businesses put up "We Support Jake" signs. Churches held prayer vigils for truth and justice. The Veterans Association honored me for defending constitutional property rights against domestic overreach. Even the school district invited me to teach renewable energy workshops, transforming my property into a hub for education, quite the opposite of the eyesore Karen had claimed it was. The HOA board voted unanimously to oust her and bar her from all future meetings. Her neighbors, once her allies, turned against her when they learned their FEs had financed her personal legal crusades. The Bank of Colorado foreclosed on her home after unpaid legal debts and tax liens piled up. The irony was rich. The woman who tried to take my land lost her own through the fallout of her own misconduct. The sharpest twist came from Dr. Whitmore's divorce filing, which revealed Karen had forged his signature on several documents, making him unknowingly complicit in federal crimes. His cooperation with prosecutors provided the last piece needed for conspiracy charges. Rebecca's investigative series went on to win a regional journalism award for exposing suburban corruption and government abuse. The story became a rallying point for property rights defenders nationwide, prompting legislative reforms in a dozen states to stop HOA overreach. The night before the final court date, I stood in my workshop surrounded by evidence of Karen's long campaign of criminal harassment, knowing without a shadow of doubt that justice was about to land hard. My printer churned out the last evidence copies as the autumn wind whispered through my solar array, the same system Karen had tried to sabotage. She had chosen the wrong person to target. The courthouse was electric that morning, humming with anticipation. The crowd spilled into hallways, reporters, activists, neighbors, and curious locals all crammed in. Judge Morrison's courtroom reeked of polished wood and the metallic edge of justice in the air. Karen stumbled in 40 minutes late with her fourth attorney in 6 months, looking like she'd aged 10 years. Designer clothes couldn't disguise the exhaustion. Her hands trembled, her eyes were hollow, and the desperate energy of someone watching their empire collapse clung to her. My legal team sat steady, evidence binders stacked like an arsenal. Judge Morrison, a no-nonsense veteran of 3 decades on the bench, took in the scene with the weary gaze of a man who'd seen every form of legal folly imaginable. Her young, inexperienced lawyer, clearly the unlucky one drafted for this disaster, rose with shaking hands. "Your Honor, my client seeks to enforce legitimate HOA authority over non-compliant property threatening community standards. he could produce nothing proving the HOA had any jurisdiction over my land. When the judge pressed him, he fumbled papers like a botched card trick. Counselor Morrison said, "Do you have any evidence that Mr. Riverside's property was ever under HOA authority?" "Well, Your Honor, we believe that is, it appears that's a no," Morrison cut in, then Frank rose calm, precise, and devastating. He laid out the original 1987 deed excluding my land from any HOA. Survey maps showing my property boundaries predated the development by 32 years, and 3 years of security footage documenting relentless harassment. The financial evidence was the fatal strike. Rebecca's reporting had traced $312,000 in stolen HOA funds, falsified incorporation documents, and invoices for phantom services. Marcus Littlefeather's testimony drove the constitutional nail in the coffin. This development sits on land with unresolved Native American claims from 1878. HOA actions against excluded parcels violate both state property law and federal treaty obligations. As the evidence piled up, Karen unraveled, whispering frantically to her lawyer, gesturing wildly, her face flushing deeper shades of red. Her breaking point came when she shouted over testimony, "This is about property values. He's destroying our community with that environmental eyesore." "Ma'am," Judge Morrison snapped, "stay silent or you'll be removed." When Frank revealed the bribery attempts, forged signatures, and false police reports, she lost all control, ranting about property rights terrorists and environmental extremists. The bailiff stepped forward, but Morrison waved him off, wanting her meltdown on record. "Miss Whitmore," he declared, "this is the worst case of HOA abuse I've seen in 30 years. Mr. Riverside's property was never under HOA jurisdiction. Your incorporation documents are fraudulent. Your financial records show systematic theft. The harassment rises to criminal conspiracy." He ruled the HOA had no legal standing, ordered its immediate dissolution, and referred the matter to federal authorities. Cheers erupted from my supporters as Karen screamed about appeals. Morrison awarded me $127,000 in damages and legal fees and slammed the gavel, marking the end of her 3-year reign of intimidation. Within hours, national news had picked up the story. Legal scholars called it a landmark win against HOA tyranny. 6 months later, Karen was serving 18 months in federal prison for embezzlement, fraud, and conspiracy, owing $427,000 in restitution she could never repay. She lost her house, her family, and her freedom to the same legal system she'd tried to weaponize. Meadowbrook Estates was reborn as a voluntary neighborhood group with no mandatory fees, no design policing, just neighbors helping neighbors. The way Sarah always envisioned. My property became the cover story for Solar Energy Today, a model of sustainable living. The very campaign meant to erase it had turned it into a nationally recognized example of environmental responsibility. The Rural Property Defense Fund now awards scholarships to help families fight HOA abuse, with Judge Crenshaw chairing the selection committee. Our strategies have helped 12 families win their cases. 3 states passed laws modeled on mine. Colorado's, known as Jake's Law, enforces criminal penalties for false HOA claims and theft of community funds. My YouTube channel, Off-Grid Jake's Property Protection, grew to 300,000 subscribers, offering legal self-defense against neighborhood bullies. Every video ends with, "Document everything. Know your rights. Never let bullies change who you are." Lincoln Elementary partnered with me to create the renewable energy center Sarah and I once dreamed of. Now, every Tuesday, 4th graders learn solar technology on my land, their laughter replacing the echoes of grief. Last September, our Valley's Property Rights Festival drew 4,000 people for workshops on solar power, legal defense, and community organizing. We raised enough for 3 more scholarships and a legal clinic for rural landowners. Former HOA common areas became the Meadowbrook Community Garden and Wildlife Preserve. The ponds Karen once patrolled are now havens for migrating birds and outdoor learning. In half a year of voluntary cooperation, we achieved more than the HOA managed in 3 years of forced compliance. Karen's downfall reads like a fable about arrogance meeting justice: prison, divorce, foreclosure, exile from her career. She works retail now under another name, far from here, but the true victory was personal. My once isolated refuge became the heart of a community built on mutual respect. Mrs. Henderson still brings cookies. Mike upgraded everyone's security systems. Rebecca visits often, finishing her book on suburban corruption. The sounds here now: children laughing, neighbors gardening, friends by the fire pit, are exactly what Sarah imagined. I finally understood. Her wisdom: fighting for what's right isn't just about winning. It's about becoming someone worthy of what you're defending. Even Voltage, now an Instagram star with 40,000 followers, helps show that rural values and environmental care can thrive together. This weekend, a disabled veteran from Texas will be here seeking help against HOA discrimination over his service dog. Next month, a Native American family needs advice to protect a sacred garden from HOA destruction. The fight for property rights never ends, and neither does the network of people ready to stand for what's right. Drop your worst HOA nightmare in the comments. It might be next week's featured story on HOA Stories. Subscribe if you believe American property rights are worth defending, and ring the bell so you don't miss another win against neighborhood tyranny. Sarah was right. Good people find each other when the times get tough. From all of us at HOA Stories, thanks for watching.